Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergeant John Weaver from America's First Corps. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our 20th anniversary observance of 9/11, also known as Patriot Day. At this time, the national anthem will be played by America's First Corps Band, followed by the invocation by Chaplain Del Tufo, America's First Corps Chaplain.
Present arms. Order, arms.
Please join me in prayer. Let us pray. Eternal God, today our nation pauses to remember the events of September 11, 2001, a day that's been inscribed in our memories and our nation's history. We knew our world would change, and we were uncertain of the future. And now, 20 years later, we look back and remember acts of bravery, courage, and selfless service by men and women first responders and men and women of our armed forces. As we pause today to reflect, let us remember those who gave their very lives to safeguard our freedoms and our way of life. Let us never forget them, their sacrifices, and their Gold Star families. And finally, may our ceremony orient us towards our hope for the future, that we are a nation filled with those who give their lives daily. We collectively ask that you protect the men and women of our armed forces, our civilian workforce, and their families on this day and every day. In your name, I pray. Amen.
It started out like any other Tuesday morning. Soldiers and airmen at then Fort Lewis-McChord Air Force Base reported for physical training. Cooks prepared breakfast, and the Madigan night shift were about to call it a day. Then, 3 time zones and 2,900 miles away, events occurred that have made this date, September 11th, 2001, one that will forever be known as a day of unspeakable tragedy and unparalleled heroism. At 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston crashed into New York City's World Trade Center North Tower. It became international breaking news. At 6:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, also from Boston, crashed into the World Trade Center South Tower. With both towers ablaze, the situation was clear. Neither crash was accidental. At 6:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington crashed into the Pentagon. At 7:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark crashed into a Shanksville, Pennsylvania field, its flight cut short when passengers and crew stormed the cockpit. From the 4 flights, 33 crew members, 213 passengers, and 125 people on the ground died. 19 hijackers also died. At 7 a.m., the World Trade Center's South Tower collapsed, killing more than 800 people. And at 7:30 a.m., the North Tower collapsed, killing more than 1,600 people in and around the tower. In all, 2,977 people, excluding the hijackers, died on September 11th. 37 days later, on October 7th, the United States and its allies counterattacked, striking al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan. The war on terror had begun. Over the past 20 years, JBLM has played a vital role in fighting terrorism. Hundreds of thousands of active, Guard, and Reserve service members have deployed from or through JBLM, supporting operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere. At one point, more than 18,000 service members from JBLM were deployed. The first U.S. service member to die in the War on Terror was Sergeant First Class Nathan Chapman, 1st Special Forces Group, Airborne, JBLM. He was killed while returning from a January 4, 2002 meeting with local tribal leaders in Afghanistan. Chapman, who'd previously served in Panama, Haiti, and Operation Desert Storm, lived in Puyallup, Washington. The most recent JBLM service member to die was Sergeant First Class Jeremy Griffin, 1st Special Forces Group, Airborne. He was killed in Afghanistan September 16, 2019. He was from Greenbrier, Tennessee, and on his 4th combat deployment. In the 17 years from 2002 to 2019, 321 JBLM service members made the ultimate sacrifice fighting the War on Terror. On July 16, 2009, Memorial Park, where we stand today, was dedicated on JBLM Lewis, Maine, to serve as a tranquil, centralized location for unit memorials to honor those who have fallen. It's fitting we mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11 at Memorial Park. It's important that we remember the events of 9/11 and honor those who died that day. It's also fitting we honor those who carried the fight to the enemy in the days that followed, particularly those who died or who live today with life-altering injuries. Whether we remember this day as it's officially known as Patriot Day or as 9/11, it must be forever a day we never forget. In honor of the victims of the 9/11 attacks and their families, as well as all the service members who died or who have been wounded fighting terrorism worldwide, to include the service members who died in Kabul on August 26th while helping in the Afghanistan evacuation effort, we'll now pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Brigadier General William A. Ryan, the Special Assistant to the Deputy Commanding General of America's 1st Corps.
Good morning. On behalf of our Commanding General, Major General Brunson, my name is Brigadier General Bill Ryan, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today on this important and solemn observance from Memorial Park here on Joint Base Lewis-McChord, as we come together to mark the 20th anniversary of the terrible attacks on our country on September 11th, 2001. I want to extend a very sincere and heartfelt welcome to the families and friends watching who lost a loved one as a result of the 9/11 attacks, and to our Gold Star family members from across our surrounding communities. We can only imagine your thoughts and feelings on this day, but please know the hearts and thoughts of the entire community are with you, your families, and your loved ones that have been lost. Today, we honor the memory of the nearly 3,000 men, women, and children lost in the attacks on September 11th, 2001, in a terrible act of war on our nation. We commemorate the service of our first responders who acted heroically in a time of great need, and we pay tribute to the patriots and families who have sacrificed their lives in the nearly 20 years of combat operations that followed in an effort to protect our homeland from future attacks. On this day, we fly American flags across our country at half-staff. We collectively share a moment of silence at 8:46 a.m. to mark a moment in time that has forever changed our history. And while the landscape changed on that day, the fabric of our country remained unbroken. Contrary to the intentions of our enemy, it weaved an even tighter bond between the citizens of this great nation. From great pain and suffering grew communities and connectedness. From uncertainty and fear grew resolve and strength. From terror meant to devastate our nation's guiding ideals of freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness grew an emboldened sense of patriotism. As I reflect on this day and the amazing patriots in uniform I am privileged to serve with, I am humbled to be among an all-volunteer force. I am reminded that so many of our service members raised their right hand and swore to defend our Constitution, joining a military and nation at war. Today, our youngest service members were born into a post-9/11 world. We must reflect, remember, and honor those lost so their stories live on with our youngest generation. We must never forget. America's military is the strength of the nation, and its men and women in uniform continue to epitomize resiliency, strength, and commitment to the country. In kind, the strength of our service members and their families here at JBLM is rooted in a deeply supportive and steadfast community of our fellow citizens, a community that loves its service members. From an amazing volunteer corps that selflessly serves others, to the incredible community partnerships that span across the South Sound region, we are united. And our local community support of our soldiers and home front over the last 20 years has enabled the accomplishment of every mission in answering the call in defense of this great country. Today, our military stands as committed as ever to the defense of our freedom. We will remain vigilant, we will train hard, and we will always be ready when called upon to defend the freedoms we hold dear, as we did 20 years ago. Let us remember that despite the actions of our adversaries 20 years ago, we Americans continue to stand strong together. In closing, in this beautiful and solemn space of Memorial Park, we honor those from our JBLM-based units who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other locations since 9/11. Each individual unit memorial is uniquely designed, but all serve to memorialize heroes from our ranks that gave their last full measure. They will never be forgotten, and their families remain a part of us and in our hearts every day. Thank you for joining us today as we mark and honor this solemn occasion in our nation's history and remember the sacrifice of so many over the last 20 years. May God continue to bless all of our service members and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, General Ryan. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel David A. Fazenbaker, the 62nd Airlift Wing Commander.
On September 11, 2001, the unthinkable happened. A large-scale, coordinated attack on our homeland occurred by a foreign terrorist organization. This act of terrorism radically and permanently altered our daily lives as Americans. As airmen, the resulting war on terror transformed the way we fight and operate. And that conflict has lasted almost 20 years. Since Desert Storm, the Air Force recognized the need to shift from long-range strategic deterrence operations to a more agile expeditionary force. The attacks on 9/11 and Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom accelerated those changes. As our enemy no longer faced us in the air or with conventional units on the ground, instead they hid among the population and relied on guerrilla-style tactics to inflict fear, chaos, and far too many casualties. To combat these tactics, precision bombing, close air support, unmanned aerial surveillance, and rapid global mobility became our specialties. Projecting decisive strength and delivering hope became our identity. At McChord, our airmen were engaged from day one. The Western Air Defense Sector scrambled F-16s to intercept a 747 airliner inbound from the Pacific that hadn't yet diverted despite the closure of U.S. airspace. The Green Tails of McChord Field and the airmen of the 62nd Airlift Wing and the 446th Airlift Wing answered the call like they have throughout history. McChord 141s delivered life-saving blood, FEMA teams, and supplies to aid the relief efforts in New York and Washington, D.C. Colonel, later General Paul Selva, the commander of the 62nd Airlift Wing at the time, remarked, "I don't think any of us will ever forget the feelings of surprise, anger, helplessness, and sadness we experienced in a span of probably 1 hour at the senseless loss of so many lives. It was a day that most of us realized the life of America was about to change forever, not just for our daily routines living in the U.S., but what would this mean to those of us wearing the blue uniform?" Within 6 months, McChord deployed troops and heavy equipment to 35 remote, forward-deployed locations. As Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom unfolded, McChord C-17s provided critical airlift and airdrop capabilities at every stage of the conflict. In 2003, McChord Air Crews conducted the largest military airdrop since 1989, inserting more than 400 vehicles, 3,000 tons of equipment, and 2,000 personnel into northern Iraq. From 2001 to 2007, McChord conducted humanitarian airdrops over Afghanistan, ultimately helping to deliver 2.5 million rations and 41,000 blankets into liberated areas. We flew thousands of hours and millions of pounds of cargo during the troop surge in 2010 and 2011, and again during retrograde operations in 2014 and 2015. Nelson Mandela once said, "There is no easy walk to freedom." Recent events in Afghanistan have shown us how true that statement is. The airmen and soldiers of Joint Base Lewis-McChord helped dismantle Al-Qaeda and deny safe haven for terrorist factions. They brought skills, supplies, and hope to a region that suffered from under extremist rule, allowed thousands of citizens to live in relative peace, freedom, and equality for nearly 20 years. We've strengthened our borders, and we've made the world a safer place through multinational partnerships and international humanitarian aid. Most recently, from August 14th to August 30th, Team McChord helped execute the largest non-combatant evacuation ever conducted by the U.S. military, safely evacuating over 120,000 people. Our airmen demonstrated compassion and care for American citizens and Afghan partners on their journeys to safety. This was nothing short of heroic, was a total force operation, and was a global collaborative effort. So I say thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and commitment. JBLM airmen and soldiers continue our peacetime outreach while standing ready to defend our nation from those who seek to do us harm. Although our mission in Afghanistan has ended, we shall never forget the victims of the 9/11 attacks or the thousands of service members who have made the ultimate sacrifice defending freedom and our way of life. Our military continues to execute our assigned missions, and our country continues to be a beacon of hope for new beginnings and a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Fazenbaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude our 9/11 observance with the firing of the volleys and the playing of taps.
Ready. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Present. Arms.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our 9/11 20th anniversary observance. Thank you for joining us. Never forget.